Hello everyone, welcome to my channel about writing stuff. My name's Camille and today we're going to talk about building culture and religion in your world. So in the fantasy sci-fi spectrum of writing, we have all sorts of cultures, from one end of the spectrum of, just people cultures to alien cultures to fairy cultures, elves, dwarves, all sorts of fun things. But no matter what type of people I'm creating, I always start the same. So when I'm starting to build these cultures, what I like to brainstorm first is their big core belief. And having that sort of baseline is a great way to start off and build around it. And what I mean by a major core belief system is anything from believing in a supreme deity or multiple deities. It could be that these people are very spiritual and believe in worshiping their ancestry. It could be that these people worship the earth, or maybe they believe that, their ancestors came from a different planet. Whatever that core belief system is, that's what I like to brainstorm. That's where I like to start. And this is usually the stage 2 where I start brainstorming religions. It's a good way to tie all of that in. So if I have a race of people that believe, that they just were kind of born of sand and stone, then I wouldn't make a religion for them, but I would have that I guess, dictation of how they actually thought they were brought into creation. But on the opposite end of things, if these people believe in gods of any kind, then I would start to build a story or a system around that to really flesh out that religion. And when you're doing these sorts of things, core beliefs, beliefs of where they came from and creation, it's good to remember that most worldly cultures have some form of written word, I guess is a good way to put it. These cultures last hundreds, if not thousands of years and span across so many miles because they have some written log of their history. Whether it's a holy book like a Bible or historical text, it could be anything from a collection of stories or poetry or songs, or tales just passed down through generations. There is a constant flood of the same belief, no matter what it is. So when you're building these cultures and you're building these religions and you're coming up with these core belief systems, what I like to do is write maybe just 1 or 2 pages of the main story of what they believe. And I really like to flesh it out so I can reference it later. And another thing to keep in mind too is if you are building maybe 1 or 2 cultures, because yes, you're making a fantasy world, but it's going to be taking place in one specific part of your world, then you can make these cultures very distinct. You can give them completely opposing core belief systems. For example, in the first book that I wrote, I just had one human culture, but then their neighbors were a fairy culture. And I gave them completely opposing core beliefs. The fairies were very spiritual. They believed in that they came from the earth and they returned to the earth, whereas my human culture believed in 3 supreme deities, and they believed that that was where their magic came from, because there was a magic system I had built for them of that contained 3 very distinct parts. And what's cool about doing this is, what's cool about doing the 2 very distinct cultures so close to each other is you can experience these different cultures through the character's eyes. I had 2 fae people in my human culture trying to acclimate and adapt, and it was weird for them to wear things like shoes and to eat certain foods and to garden inside of a greenhouse instead of being outside and just, the natural brush and woods and things like this. But if you're going larger scale, if you have a really big scope story that you're going for and you need to build several of these cultures and worlds, then distinct might not be what you're going for. And what I usually like to do if I'm going big scope is drop a map. It doesn't have to be pretty, just some blobs on a page with maybe some lines where the countries are divided. And then I like to mark on the map where each of these cultures are and where each of these religions are practiced. And what's great about this is, you can build two cultures in the same country that have the same maybe religion or maybe have the same core belief system, but you can make subtle differences. Maybe the family dynamic is a little different. Maybe the music is a little different, or the food, or, jobs and education and things like this. But when you have a lot of different cultures spanning your entire world, they're not all going to be distinct. A lot of them are going to be similar, just like in our world. A lot of religions and beliefs in creation have a lot of similar flavor, have a lot of similar background, and a lot of these things, branch off of each other and become sort of their own unit over time. So that's another good thing to do also is if you are really interested in histories and myths and legends and things like this, you can start with one core belief system in your world and sort of permeate it out through, and see how things would change moving from country to country, continent to continent. And after you have all of these big core beliefs for your people, you understand where they are on the map, and you understand and build what sort of agriculture they have, and farming techniques and medicine and all these things, then you can start building all the small stuff. What are their festivals like, holidays like, what is there a rites of passage for these people when they get to a certain age, what sorts of jobs these people work, all of those little things. And it's just like regular world building where you ask questions and you find answers. But when you're working around this one major core belief system for these people, and where they are in the world, it's a little bit easier to sort of weave these things in and make it a very cohesive structure. So that's all I have for you guys on culture and religion. I'll dig into it, I think, a little bit more once I go into building languages next week. But for now, the resource that I have for you is another podcast. It is the Myths and Legends podcast, hosted by Jason Weiser. I think I said that right. And what I love about the Myths and Legends podcast is he takes these stories from all of these different cultures across the entire world, and he leaves in a lot of the formal names and pronunciations. And when it comes to building cultures, myths and legends are very distinct, and they're usually really weird, and they usually don't make that much sense. So it makes for a really interesting listen to sort of pick up on those cultural differences, the changing in names, formality, and little things too, like what they're eating, what sort of inanimate objects they have, things like this. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, go check out the Myths and Legends podcast. And then I will see you guys next week to talk about language. So in the meantime, you should be writing stuff.